This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. Finally, Republicans are coming forward to attack Donald Trump and call it for what it is. The emperor has no clothes. The emperor has no defenses. And he's going to lose at trial against Jack Smith on at least the 37-count indictment related to Mar-a-Lago and the secretion, hiding, obstruction, destruction of the country's most important national security documents, national defense information. It is clear to any thinking person that Trump should never be trusted again with the nation's secrets, with the nation's top secret and classified information. He should not occupy the White House. He should not be the leader of the free world. He has disqualified himself. And the only reason that he is being prosecuted is because of his own bad acts. And if you don't believe me, you can believe the words of people that have either served with him in his cabinet, in which when they were introduced as the best and the brightest. Donald Trump would only hire, qualified managers, brilliant people, credits to our country. And of course, when all of them disagreed with him and have disagreed with him now they are, effing idiots, brain dead, lazy, and all of that. In fact, Christie, just this week, just in the last few hours, and now that he's running for office, has finally come forward and said, as a former U.S. attorney himself, Donald Trump has committed crimes against the country. He should be convicted of those crimes if the evidence bears it out, and that he is a quote-unquote petulant child, and therefore you shouldn't elect a petulant child. You should send that petulant child to his room, not to the White House. That's Christie. Let's take a look at a clip from Christie.
Now look, either Donald Trump, if you believe what he said when they left, that means he didn't pick the very best people and doesn't know how to pick personnel. If you believe what he said at the beginning, the great stuff, then this guy is the worst manager in the history of the American presidency. Either way, Republicans should listen to what he says. He's a petulant child when someone disagrees with him. And whether it's Bill Barr or John Kelly or General Mattis, whether it is Mick Mulvaney or whether it's, General Milley, if you disagree with Donald Trump, the petulant child comes out and he calls you names like the ones you just mentioned and the ones I mentioned.
So Christie's interesting because for a long time he was touted to be, at least in the running, to be Attorney General for Donald Trump before he picked Jeff Sessions and then replaced him with Bill Barr. The only reason I think that he wasn't ultimately selected by Donald Trump, although he was close to him, is because in his day job as the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, he prosecuted successfully Jared Kushner's father. For those that forgot that Jared Kushner's father is a convicted felon for fraud and went away for a number of years because Christie prosecuted him, let me remind you. And it's that Jared Kushner, the one that's married to Ivanka, now Kushner, formerly Ivanka Trump. So the chances of Christie ever really getting ahead in Donald Trump's administration was sort of slim, but he's always been an advisor, part of the kitchen cabinet. And now, of course, he's courageous now that he's running for office, and now that Donald Trump is his competitor. Where was he before? But he has come out strong, calling him a petulant child. Where else have we heard those words before? This is starting to sound like talking points are being developed by the never Trumpers. Oh, right. Bill Barr, former Attorney General, the guy who actually got the job, also has now taken on Donald Trump week after week. Last week, he said about Donald Trump that he is toast based on Bill Barr as lawyer review of the indictment and the evidence that's reflected there. Then Donald Trump went out and attacked Bill Barr and said he's fat and lazy, stupid, all the things he didn't say when he told the American people that he was putting these people into their positions of authority and power. So what did Bill Barr do this weekend? Well, he was on Face the Nation, and I'll let him speak for himself. Here's his clip.
To that standard.
You say Trump's alleged conduct is indefensible. So many Republicans continue to defend him. What will it say if the party, your longtime party, puts him forward as their nominee?
Well, that's the problem. I don't think they're actually defending his conduct, but they are saying it's unfair to prosecute him. But that then raises another question. Okay, if it's unfair to prosecute him, that's not the whole answer. The question is, should we be putting someone like this forward as the leader of the country, leader of the free world, who is engaged in this kind of conduct? The other thing is, this is not just an isolated example. Trump has many good qualities, and he accomplished some good things. But the fact of the matter is, he is a consummate narcissist, and he constantly engages in reckless conduct that puts his political followers at risk and the conservative and Republican agenda at risk.
Would he put the country at risk if he was in the White House again?
He will always put his own interests and gratifying his own ego ahead of everything else, including the country's interests. There's no question about it. This is a perfect example of that. He's like a defiant 9-year-old kid who's always pushing the glass toward the edge of the table, defying his parents to stop him from doing it. It's a means of self-assertion and exerting his dominance over other people. And he's a very petty individual who will always put his interests ahead of the country's, his personal gratification of his ego. But our country can't be a therapy session for, a troubled man like this.
This is not the only special counsel investigation.
I think it's interesting there that Bill Barr is not pulling any punches. He comes right out and says that these are wacky defenses that hold no water. You're not allowed to convert battle plans and war plans into your personal documents. That's just crazy. He says that if he's convicted or even based on the indictment, he's in very serious harm, Donald Trump, and should not serve in that position at all, that he engaged in deceitful conduct, that he lied to the Department of Justice, notwithstanding his own lawyers, and that, as you heard on his Face the Nation, that he is a consummate narcissist who is fundamentally flawed. And I like this quote about our country cannot be a therapy session for a troubled man such as this. I mean, Bill Barr didn't cover himself with any glory and did not prove to be a stopgap against Donald Trump's worst instincts when he was the Attorney General, except in a couple of small instances. But, I'll give him some credit now for coming forward on national television and attacking this guy. I mean, this is beginning to be the death by 1,000 paper cuts. There's really two worlds going on right now. The Republican nomination is Donald Trump's to lose. He's up by 30 points, 40 points. The more the runner-up, Ron DeSantis, does to try to get in the lead, the worse it is for him. It's like a boomerang. He throws it and it hits himself in the head. Nobody wants Ron DeSantis's vision for America, where he takes Florida and all the laws that he passed that are against democracy and against self-autonomy and dignity and apply them nationwide. In other words, we don't want Florida impressed upon the United States of America, and the voters are telling him that in no uncertain terms. So Donald Trump is going to win that nomination, which is great for the Democrats, but terrible for any attempt to continue to unite the country. So you've got Bill Barr. He says he's a 9-year-old. You've got Christie. He says Donald Trump is a petulant child, again disqualifying him for holding the highest office in the land and the leader of the free world position ever again. And then to add on, we have a third Republican and a second member of his cabinet, Defense Secretary Mark Esper, who held the job all the way until just after the election when Donald Trump decided not to have a defense secretary at all. How convenient, right before Jan 6th, and the fact that nobody called the National Guard or any protective forces to show up at the Capitol because there was no defense secretary, only an acting one. Let's think about that for a minute. But Mark Esper also went on television today. He went on CNN, and he said point blank that Donald Trump shouldn't get anywhere near any type of national defense information ever again. Let's roll that clip.
Do you think his actions put America's national security at risk?
Well, the revelations are very troubling, disturbing, and yes, I do. If the allegations are true that it contained information about our nation's security, about our vulnerabilities, about other items, it could be quite harmful to the nation. And look, no one is above the law. And so I think this process needs to play out and people held to account, the president held to account.
You work closely with Trump. I've heard two different theories as to why he had these documents. One from Stephanie Grisham, who said He just likes, these are mine, and he's like a child with a toy. And one from Michael Cohen. He said he thought that Trump had these documents because he wanted to use them to further his own power or financial well-being in some way. Why do you think he held on to these documents and went to such lengths to stop them, to prevent them from being turned over to the government?
Yeah, look, I think both theories could be true and likely are true to some extent. Who knows? People have described him as a hoarder when it comes to these type of documents, but clearly it was unauthorized, illegal, and dangerous. And look, we have a case playing out right now in Massachusetts where that young airman from the Massachusetts National Guard is being charged on similar types of accounts under the Espionage Act for taking and retaining unauthorized documents that affected our national defense.
Based on your experiences working with the Trump and the actions alleged in the indictment, do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
Well, based on his actions, again, if proven true under the indictment by the special counsel, no. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk. You cannot have these documents floating around. They need to be secured. We know how that happens, that only authorized persons are allowed to see documents or receive information from documents. So look, we got to take this very seriously. These are serious issues.
So now you've got, let's line these up all within hours of each other. We got the Christie, Bill Barr, and now Mark Esper talking about why Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed anywhere near our most confidential and secret and sacred national defense information ever again. Mark Esper went one further. He said Trump committed illegal acts and put our national security at risk, and that any of the defenses that he's raising have been absurd. I mean, I think this is fodder for those that watch these hot takes and follow us on Legal AF and the MeidasTouch network. This is helpful because, if you get inside the, the Trump reverberation machine, inside this locked tank of comments that are just made in a vacuum over and over again, reverberating. You would think that all Republicans feel this way. I mean, you've got a series of people who are candidates for the highest office who are not even showing that they have the brass or the balls to be a leader because they're not taking on Donald Trump. I mean, ridiculous things that Nikki Haley says out loud, ridiculous things that Scott says out loud, none of them wanting to condemn him and trying to thread the needle to say, well, we think he did really bad things, but we don't think he should be prosecuted for it. That doesn't work. Not in this country. Now you're arguing for a free pass for somebody who committed some of the most heinous crimes in our history as violations of the Espionage Act. So if right now you've got the drumbeat all in the same week in sort of a coordinated effort, I would imagine, among the never-Trumpers who are worried about this country, even from the Republican platform and the Republican point of view. In Mark Esper, Donald Trump's former Secretary of Defense, his former Attorney General, Bill Barr, and his almost Attorney General, Christie, all looking the American people in the eye and telling them the exact same thing that we've been saying only on the MeidasTouch network for over 2 years. Donald Trump is a danger to America. He is a danger to the free world. He is not qualified and has disqualified himself from getting anywhere near the nuclear football, our most cherished principles to be placed back into the White House. It's not a game anymore. Or as Bill Barr said, this isn't about a national therapy session for somebody who is completely out of control. This is about keeping our constitutional republic in place and not tearing it asunder and making sure that we have moral authority around the world to be the superpower with morals that's left. And we can't do that if Donald Trump is occupying that office. So I'm going to follow on hot takes just like this. How many others come forward? I mean, you got Asa Hutchinson, who also is trying to thread the needle as he's running for office, that he says if Donald Trump, I think we have a tweet of it, if Donald Trump is convicted of Espionage Act or a serious felony, it should disqualify him. I don't know why the indictments don't disqualify him, Mr. and Mrs. Republican, as your leading candidate. That's the best you can do on the Republican side. Twice impeached, soon to be 3 to 6 time indicted, sexual abuser adjudged. That's your best candidate? I mean, how do you explain all this away? I mean, again, we're back to the death by 1,000 paper cuts. You can say, well, the first 3, even if you give them a pass on the first 3 sets of crimes and criminal conspiracies, what do you do with 4, 5, and 6? How many of those can you explain away? And more importantly, how many of those in your deepest, darkest heart at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's just you, yourself, and your God, do you really think your candidate, Donald Trump, is going to run the table and go 6-0 in front of juries around America, state and federal, and with appellate courts about the crimes that he's committed? Bill Barr put it best. Bill Barr said Donald Trump has no one to blame but Donald Trump. He committed these acts. It's not the Democrats creating new criminal laws and finding he violated them. Those laws have been on the books for dozens and dozens and years, some of them up to 100 years. It's just that, to paraphrase the Republicans, Donald Trump is a petulant 9-year-old that should be sent to his room, not back to the White House. That's the Republican leadership talking, not me. I didn't grow up to be a Republican leader. I grew up to be what you see here. A practicing trial lawyer for over 32 years who appears regularly on the MeidasTouch network and co-founded and co-anchors one of the leading political and legal podcasts in America called Legal AF, also only on the MeidasTouch network. That's what I did. What they did is they got to the highest levels of power for Republicans. And they're looking the American people in the eye, and it may be late, but it's not too late. I'd rather them do it now than not do it at all. And that's what we're seeing. Today, it's Barr, Esper, Hutchinson, and Christie. Let's see who else comes forward. Mitch McConnell's been awful quiet lately, although we can just roll his tape for what he said the day after Jan 6th. That should torpedo any effort for Donald Trump to get off the mat. And MAGA just thinks, they're not Republicans. They're not conservatives. They're not Goldwater or Reagan Republicans. They're not Lincoln Republicans. All of those leaders are spinning in their graves. They're not even Nixonian Republicans. They're just cult leaders. Cult followers to a cult leader. That's all they are. Donald Trump is barely a Republican. He was a Democrat for most of his life. He only became Republican out of convenience. And these people that follow him because, he's ballsy, he's brash, they think they're watching some giant WWE World Wrestling match, or they're watching MMF fighting. And they want Donald Trump to be their fighter to come into the ring. We're talking about democracy. We're talking about a constitutional republic that's almost 300 years old. We're not talking about your guy. I don't care about your guy. I care about my country and what is happening to it because your guy is completely insane and out of control, and you don't recognize that. He should be in a padded cell at this rate, not being the leading candidate for the Republican Party. I say that with a little bit of glee because I welcome that as a Democrat. I can't think of a weaker, less suitable candidate to be running against than this version of Donald Trump. And we'll continue to follow it on the MeidasTouch network. If you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm, helps keep this content coming to you and the quality of that content. You can open up a dialogue with me on the chats, and then you can follow me, Michael Popok, on all things social media at MS Popok. This is Michael Popok, Legal AF reporting.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.